Welcome to the Care Right podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of Care Right Incorporated, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the Care Right podcast.
Having an important conversation today, and my guest, Annalee Kruger, founder of Care Right Incorporated, is the person that I have asked to join me in having a conversation around loss and grief and supporting our aging parents. Annalee Kruger has over 25 years of experience in the senior care industry. She's a nationally recognized expert and author in the field of senior care planning. Annalee and her company Care Right was founded for the purpose of helping families navigate the complexities associated with caring for our aging loved ones. Today we talk about how we as adult children can support our parent in their grief and the complex emotions that may arise after losing a spouse, what specific opportunities that we can encourage our loved ones to participate in to feel more connected to others, the ways that we can support their physical health and well-being after losing a spouse. Do we need to look at their home environment to make sure that they are safe and secure? And how we can support those practical aspects of daily living. And as we navigate our own grief, how we can be supportive to the loved ones around us. It's so important that we have an aging plan in place ahead of time, have some conversation in advance, so we know how to navigate this loss and dynamics as they happen in our families. Here is my interview with Annalee Kruger. Hi, Annalee. The day is here. We get to visit. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for joining me.
Me too. Thanks, Nicole, for having me.
Absolutely. So we were connected by someone we mutually admire. I love his energy. He's going to do and is doing incredible things in this space. Chris Channa, he brought us together. So thank you, Chris, if you're listening.
He's probably one of those types of people that if you have a room of 100 people and you say Chris Channa, they'll be like, oh yeah, we know Chris.
Yeah. Exactly. I know. It's so fun. And I've had the opportunity to meet him in person, and he is just as dynamic and wonderful as you think he would be. So glad he brought us together. And with that, I love what you're up to. You have a really cool story. You've been in this space for, almost 25 years or 25 years plus. And I would love to hear from you more about how you became so passionate about older adults and equipping families with what they need to navigate this world and this journey.
Great. Well, it actually started, in my opinion, it started when I was little. We were fortunate enough to bring my grandparents in. I'm an Iowa farm kid, so we had this big Iowa, farmhouse, and our grandparents ended up moving in with us because back in the 70s, they didn't have assisted living and they didn't have independent living and they didn't have the services like they do now. And that shaped me. And so that's why, when I was 9 years old, I just knew that I was going to help families with aging loved ones. I just didn't know in what type of capacity because I was only 9, but it's called social work.
Yeah.
And aging planning.
Right.
And I figured it out.
So good. Yes.
So I worked in long-term care. When I was in college, I worked as an activity assistant in nursing homes and memory care facilities, and just love my seniors. And then as I got my social work degree, I moved into more, obviously the social work and marketing roles and executive director roles of long-term care, and found that I was doing a lot of education for families. They didn't understand aging. Why does one doctor's appointment take all day? Or why does my dad act like this? And they didn't understand dementia, and they didn't understand, because by then we had independent living and assisted living and memory care, and they didn't understand all the differences between those and how to pay for care and how to, as a family, navigate those family dynamics that that do pop in during the aging process. So
Yeah.
that's what I built my business around.
Yes. And your business is called Care Right Inc. And how do you support families? So as we have a specific topic that I was like, Annalee, can you talk with me about this today? But
Yeah.
you guys are so comprehensive in the ways that you do that. So share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So when I was a social worker and marketer in long-term care and CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities that have all the different levels of care, back then, 30 years ago, one person managed all of that. Nowadays they have a marketer for each level of care, but back then they did not.
Right.
So part of my role was to do the tours, and every single day, multiple times a day, families came in to take a tour of all or any of the levels of care because they found themselves in a medical crisis. Mom fell, she broke her hip, she's in the hospital, she is the primary caregiver to dad with dementia. What do we do? Dad can't be home by himself. We're supposed to be at the hospital advocating for mom. Or often even worse, the kids were coming in to tour because mom was the primary caregiver to dad. She had a major stroke because of caregiver burnout. And now the kids are coming in to look for memory care options for the surviving spouse. And the kids didn't know what questions to ask. They didn't know what to look for. This is the first time they'd been in a memory care unit or a rehab unit or a nursing home. And they were just really taken aback by the environment and how dependent and vulnerable these frail elderly people were. And so it kind of caught them off guard when I would ask them, well, does your loved one have a living will, a power of attorney? Do they have long-term care insurance? Is your dad a veteran? How can we help offset the cost of care? Because they all think Medicare is going to pay for everything all of the time. And the answers were, I don't know. And so in 2011, I left corporate America and started Care Right Incorporated. It's a nationwide, I went virtual right away because families don't live near each other.
Yeah.
And so the only way I could facilitate their family meeting and help them know what their care options are and how to navigate the care communities and how to facilitate family meetings was to leverage technology. So back then we only had Skype. So that's what I did. So I take some pride knowing that I'm one of the pioneers in this industry who has a consulting firm that does what I do. There aren't other companies that do what we do.
Right.
But that's how we help families. We facilitate family meetings, find out what's working well, what's not working well, what are the goals, what's the financial picture. We talk to mom and dad, what's important to you as you age, and we bring everybody together and help them understand aging and help them understand dementia and help them outline for them what their care options are based on what they can afford.
Yeah, that support system is so important. It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
Yep. And we teach them, it's education based, really. It's education based aging planning because families come to us in crisis. They're overwhelmed. They're in over their head as caregivers. Their marriages are on the brink because even the most loving, supportive spouses are like, honey, I love your parents, but we need to figure out what to do with them because you're gone more than you're not. And when you are home, you don't have the energy for us as a family,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so many dynamics arise when we go through all of it. Yeah. The one we're going to talk about today, which I've been being asked this question quite a bit, is how can we, as adult children, support mom or dad after the loss of their spouse, the grief? How do we look at helping them be set up for success, whether it's in their home, all of the various components of that. So thank you for talking with us and sharing your expertise because you've had interaction with so many families and help get them set up for success. So I'm appreciative that you're here. So with that question, we're going to dive in. Yeah. How can adult children, not only we're going to talk about like logistics and more of the practical side, but also the emotional component, and how do we help our parent manage some of those feelings of loneliness, of the grief, of that isolation after we lose a spouse. It's a huge change.
It is a huge change, and we're actually, and even in my own family, we're going through this. So my mom died completely unexpectedly a couple of years ago, and yesterday, April 4th, would have been their 65th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
So what's important, in my opinion, what's important for us adult kids, because we're grieving also, right? Especially if your parent was someone that you were actually close to and you love them very much. It's a whole different thing if relationships were strained and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so like yesterday, and if your viewers or listeners are in the same situation, what we did was I scheduled a family Zoom meeting. My family's just like all my other client families. They all live across the country. So I texted my siblings and I'm like, Tuesday is mom and dad's 65th anniversary. Let's hop on a Zoom and just support him and share stories about like our favorite times and favorite memories with mom. And that was really soothing for my dad.
Yeah.
I think it's also important that you just have a basic understanding of grief, that there's no timeline. You can't put expectations like, well, it's been 3 years. You should be, the house should be cleaned out by now. You should have gotten rid of mom's stuff. You should be, volunteering or dating or doing, you can't put a timeline and an expiration date on grief, because every day there's going to be a scent, or there's going to be a memory, or there's going to be something that somebody says, or you're going to walk by and see a picture that's going to remind you of your loved one. Like sunflowers, for example, are something that when my dad sees those, it's bittersweet, because that was my mom's favorite flower. That's how we decorated her memory care unit. It was all yellow and sunflowers. And so it's bittersweet when we see a picture of a sunflower. It's like a remembrance of mom, but yet a grief, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's, and I think it's also important for us to give ourselves grace as adult kids, and we need to go through the feelings that we need to go through as well, because if we try to curb those or get back into work right away, or just kind of put those grief feelings under the rug, if we can't fully appreciate the grief ourselves, I don't think that gives us capacity to fully appreciate the grief in someone else.
Oh, that's such a true point. It really
Wasn't
is.
that profound?
Yeah,
and I've
that
only had
is.
like 8 sips of coffee.
Wow. Yeah.
That was really
That's
profound,
really
I think.
profound. It's very honest, and it's very true that if we don't recognize that within ourselves, we can't recognize that in others either, or support that and go through it. Yeah.
I think it's important to and it depends on kind of where your family is at. So with my mom, she died completely unexpectedly in a memory care facility, and my dad lives with me now in the winter, right? Because, I live in Florida, just so people know, I live in Florida. We're from Iowa, and who wants to stay in the Midwest? When you're 85,
Not
when
me.
you have a daughter who lives in Florida, that's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to just cry together. Like yesterday for my mom and dad's anniversary, dad and I just sat on side by side on his bed, and I held his hand, and we both cried and shared some memories yesterday morning, and kind of what we call momisms. So I think if you can have some, I don't want this to come out wrong, but if you can have some fun with grief.
Right.
So what I mean by that is, with my mom's dementia, my mom was always very sweet and kind and loving and just complimentary. And so, but as her dementia progressed, she became even more so. So she would tell everybody, "I love you so much." And she would, to the healthcare workers and stuff like that. And then when we would go visit her, she knew where her room was, but every time we go to see her every day, she's like, I don't know where my room is, but then she'd get right up with her walker and beeline it to her room so we could visit. So all these fun, cute little momisms or cute little things that she would say or cute little things that she would do, remembering those and reminiscing about those is really helpful and really powerful. And, sharing
this is all with the assumption and hope
Mhm.
that you have a close knit family,
Right.
like we do,
Yeah.
and I tell dad again yesterday, you did a good job picking mom. She was a really
Mm.
great mom, and she taught us
Mhm.
everything that we needed to know, and you were a great team. And so just
Mm.
reassuring and praising your surviving parent
Mhm.
about the kind of person that they chose to be your parent.
That's a really great piece of advice. I haven't heard that perspective before, but I really like that, like honoring them and who they
Yeah.
are and their choices. And there's
Yeah.
something about the power of vulnerability when you were saying that you and your dad cried together. When we show emotion and can share what we're feeling, I think that allows other people to feel safe to be able to do that too, you know?
Right.
And as a parent, they might be feeling like, and obviously I'm generalizing, that, oh, I want to keep it together so my kids aren't worried or that everything's okay. And it's okay. We can still be okay and cry at the same time.
That's right.
So
That's right.
that can live
We
together.
have we have my sister is really techie and she's really artsy. So she I don't know, there's people that are way smarter than me know how to do this,
Hmm.
but she took a
Hmm.
picture that I had of mom and she made it into a pillow. And
Mm.
so dad holds that literally every day and it's on his bed and that comforts him
Hmm.
and we did that before mom passed away. We actually made both of them a pillow with each other's faces on it as an anniversary gift like 5 years ago, and they both
Oh,
loved that.
yeah.
So I think the more that you can incorporate that kind of thing as well,
Hmm.
like a memory blanket or a memory
Hmm.
pillow. I have a memorial table for my mom, so it's got
Hmm.
her pictures and it's got a little lock of her hair. um, as she progressed with dementia, she loved playing Uno. So we played Uno for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And we watched Sound of Music for 9,000 times in a
Hmm.
year. So I have like all these cute
Yes.
little memory things.
Hmm.
And so we'll stand at the table and we'll just honor mom, on a regular basis too. And I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful.
Oh, it is. And that's the emotional component, right? We also know there are logistics or practical ways that we want to set things in place. So if we're looking at how to have our parents set up for interacting with others or some of the maintaining their physical health, well-being in the home, what advice would you give us in that situation?
So for the social perspective, I think it's really important to give them the space and the time that they need to come out of their widowed shell a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll hopefully come out of that on their own. And in time, it could be months, it could be a year or two.
Mm.
um encourage activities, encourage socialization, maybe volunteering. I think it can depend on the way that the last few years had been. Like with my dad,
Mhm.
he'd been mom's primary caregiver. She had dementia, early onset dementia, so he'd been a caregiver for a decade.
Wow. Yeah. Was
So
that
he
adjustment
he was
hard? I'm
already,
sure.
yeah, so his, and this is something that you always have to watch for when you have parents where especially one of them has dementia. It becomes very lonesome and lonely
Mhm.
for that primary caregiver because they don't have someone that they can have intellectual conversations with or be like, hey, let's do this next week, because they have to so live in the moment.
Yeah.
So from a social perspective, give them some time to like get adjusted as a widow, and especially if it was completely unexpected. It's going
Mhm.
to just take them some time to wrap their mind around, okay, this is my new reality. And but if your surviving parent is ill, cancer or other aging issues, they're also contending with their own fate.
Mm. Yeah.
And I do want to say too, because I run a private Facebook caregiver group, and sometimes they'll say, well, now that mom is dad, now that mom is passed, dad talks about, well, I'm ready to go now too. And then the kids get all like bent out of shape. And I'm like, so I always have to educate them and say, that doesn't mean that they're going to go commit suicide, and if you really do feel like that because they have a history of that and they have a history of mental illness, then yeah, you need to take that seriously. But oftentimes, because I've worked with seniors for 30 years, they know that they're not going to get healthier. They know that they're not going to get more independent, and when I ask my clients, what are your goals as you age? They want to age in place at home and they don't want to be a burden on their kids. Right. So when they say things like that, well, I'm ready to be with your mother, or it doesn't mean that you have to sound the alarms that something terrible is going to happen. They're missing their spouse.
They are. And it's grief and love speaking of that void and wanting to find some comfort, and also they're processing the emotion of grief and getting that understanding of, well, now what? And we say the hard things, right? In our sadness.
And, and it also depends, if your parent was in the hospice program when they passed away, they have a really, really, really impactful and effective bereavement program. So leverage that, because that's a really good tool for all of you as a family. Hospice isn't just serving, your parent, it's for the whole family. And so if your loved one was on the hospice program, utilize that bereavement period or utilize that bereavement program that they offer. There's also, widow support groups or family support groups. There's, and since COVID especially, there's all sorts of online support groups these days. There's Facebook support groups for these types of scenarios, which is great because maybe your surviving parent doesn't drive anymore, or they're too frail and elderly to go somewhere for a group. But with the pandemic, a lot of our seniors kind of got forced into having to get comfortable with technology, and it was a saving grace for them.
Yeah, they were able to connect in ways and manage life.
Otherwise, they were stuck in their own homes or stuck in their apartments or stuck in their assisted living apartments and stuff. So trying to leverage technology as well to help them know that the world is bigger than their living room.
Yeah. And on the practical side, some of those day-to-day functioning things that we maybe one spouse managed all of the meals or someone did the finances, and looking at that, how can we support our parents in that situation?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty much 100% of the time of situations that I work with families is when we're doing the aging plan. That's what I find out is, okay, so what is everybody's role? Like, so maybe dad's role was always making sure the house maintenance was done and the furnace filter and, the car oil changes and tire rotations and stuff. And then mom's job was always cooking and cleaning and running the inside of the house, or maybe paying bills.
Yeah.
And so ideally, before anyone passes away, you as a family have have family meetings about the what whens of aging, and what if someone passes away, what are the accounts, what are the passwords, getting all of this stuff in order. What are the insurance policies? Do you have your funeral arrangements taken care of? But like figuring out, having these conversations about who does what in your unit, like who does, dad, what do you do? Mom, what do you do? Because that's the other reality is if, for example, mom always paid the bills and was the personal person in charge of the checkbook and stuff, if she passes away and she knows all the accounts and passwords, dad's not going to have a clue of where they are financially, and just like if dad passes away, mom's not going to know when the last oil change was. Like we don't pay attention to stuff like that, So get systems in place sooner rather than later. But unfortunately, it usually takes a chronic disease or a death for families to start to be like, ooh, we were really ill prepared for this. Let's do better now. And so now you have that opportunity. to have those types of conversations about, Dad, what do you need help with? You know, I know Mom always did the cooking. You know, I've had husbands who have no idea how to run a dishwasher. They have no idea how to run a washing machine or a clothes dryer. They have no idea. So the more that we can prepare each other for success, the better.
Yeah. I have people in my life that don't know how to run the washing machine or dishwasher. So I can see that just day to day looking at those functional tasks so that we can get through that. Yeah, and having the family support that. How about in terms of, okay, so I know you had spoke a little bit about putting things in the home that provide that comfort. Can we talk about setting the home environment? So looking at not only things that provide comfort, but also safety, or evaluating that?
Yeah, and just to kind of like circle back real quick, because this is real life stuff that I deal with literally every single day. So when I'm talking about like the grab and go binder, or making sure that you have all of these documents in order and everything is in place and buttoned up, just even so, like last week I was working with another new family, same thing. The spouse had dementia, primary caregiver was burned out, kids didn't understand, or they were just in denial. They didn't notice that their mother was burning out so much because they didn't understand the demands that their dad had on their mom and all this kind of stuff. So unfortunately, they were blindsided that mom died unexpectedly. Well, it wasn't unexpectedly, because we know that spouses that are primary caregivers have a 65% mortality rate, and the signs are always there, but the kids need to be educated so they can prevent that from happening. So anyway, the kids are like going through the house and going through all this stuff because mom can't stay there, or, you know, the surviving spouse can't stay there for safety issues because of dementia. And they had found that, you know, the car insurance was expired, and that their mom had been driving with an expired plate for a period of time because the kids just didn't have like the when we visit mom and dad checklist that we go over with our clients. And so that's something that the kids were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe mom never got pulled over, because we just didn't know that we should check on stuff like that. Well, mom was so overburdened with taking care of dad with dementia that she didn't have time to do all that stuff. And, you know, things are going to fall through the cracks. So let's talk about like the safety at home, right?
Perfect,
so
yes.
so let's say that the surviving parent is frail and elderly, and now that the primary caregiver has passed away, most likely from stroke or heart attack, or some other chronic disease or caregiver burnout, you really need to sit back and say, okay, family, does it make sense for the surviving spouse to stay at home? What if so, how are we going to pay for the care? Do they live in an area where they can actually get care? You know, northern Wisconsin, for example, or some of our small towns in Iowa, that's not like there's all these senior resources available. So the more that you can be educated about what kind of care solutions are even in your area, or does it maybe make sense to, you know, start putting an aging plan in place where we're like, okay, you live here, but all of us kids live in 4 different states, and we can't just be there to check on you because you're frail, elderly, and mom was your caregiver, right? So does it make sense for you to stay where you are? And if so, what kind of funds does your parent have to be able to put in like a wheelchair ramp or widen the hallways, or, you know, some of them live in the split foyers where everywhere you go, there's steps, you know, so how feasible is it for them to stay at home? Do they have a budget to renovate their home to make it senior safe? Do they have just the simple safety things like grab bars in place, high toilets or toilet risers? Do they have the rugs pulled up, or at least rubber backed rugs? Do they have burned out light bulbs, and so when they do get up at night they can't see, and of course they're going to fall? Do they have stuff all over the place? Is the house cluttered? You know, some of our seniors in the generation of the Depression, they kept everything, and you know, do they have clear pathways that they can get to and from the bathroom? Do they have exercise? Like, Are they exercising? Oftentimes when people get frail and elderly or widowed, they just sit in their recliner and watch TV all day. Well, that's not stimulating. They're not exercising because they get too comfortable sitting and watching TV all day.
Yeah.
So that means they're not exercising properly. They're not eating well, usually. Because what if the spouse was the one who did the cooking, right? And so now the surviving spouse is like, I don't know how to cook. So what are they going to eat? They're going to eat Twinkies and potato chips, things they don't have to cook, things they can just open and eat.
Yeah.
Right. And so is the furniture raised properly? Like, is it at the right height, for the surviving spouse? Like with my parents, my dad's 6'4", my mom was 5'2". But as they started shrinking, dad was 6'1" and mom was 4'9". So dad's furniture has to be high, mom's has to be low. So the more that we can keep them safe while they are at home and prevent falls, the better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, do you have reminders? Like maybe the spouse that passed away, the parent that passed away was the one who took care of all the medication reminders and setting up the medications and coordinating the care. Who's going to fill that void? And we find often that if adult kids have to keep flying back and forth all the time, it's not affordable.
Yeah.
It's not an affordable, sustainable thing. When airfare is like $1,000 at a time, when you get that crisis call that, hey, I fell again. And that's what we do. We jump on the next flight and we're like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Well, you don't want to keep band-aiding a problem. Let's just fix it. Let's put an aging plan in place so that when care is needed, you know who you're going to use for care, how you're going to pay for that care. While they're at home, you're going to make sure that they're as safe as they can be. We're going to teach you how to interview home care companies. We're going to teach you how to tour these different care facilities so that dad doesn't end up being bounced around because you chose an assisted living that's not a long-term solution for him, right?
Yeah.
Families don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So
yeah,
there's other things for safety, like you can leverage technology. You can, if your surviving parent has mental capacity, you can use pill dispensers that beep. You can set the beep so that oh, it's time to take my pills. You can put a camera in the house in the more the public areas, so that's like, well, why didn't dad answer the phone? Well, then you can zoom in and be like, oh, that's because he fell in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You can get sensors. I mean, there's so much technology nowadays. You can get sensors like for the windows. You could get sensors for the door so that you get a text alert. Like if someone opens the windows or opens a door, you can get like GPS on their car and on their phone, on their cell phone. So you can like track, like, is dad getting lost when he's driving? So you can leverage technology. You can get like Apple Watches, the new ones have the fall, and you can dial 911. Like there's so much technology we can leverage until we get a better permanent plan in place.
Right. And to even come alongside the logistics to offer that even extra level of oversight, I think. Yeah. There's so many age
and it's not intrusive, which is really cool. So like for dad, and he's on board with all this because his goal is to be independent and safe, right? Because who wants the opposite of that? Nobody.
Yeah.
So he's been very cooperative with whatever solutions that we have so we have him on Life 360 on his phone and our phone. So like, it's like, hey, he should have been home like an hour ago. Where is he? So we can track to make sure that he didn't get in a car accident or get lost or whatever. So there's all sorts of different apps these days that we can use that are, so that we can just keep loving tabs on them to make sure that they're okay, not to spy on them or be intrusive, but just for our own peace of mind, especially when they don't live close by.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically when, you brought up app, and it made me think of another interview I did with the CEO of Empathy, Ron Gura. And Empathy is an app that walks people through after loss, right? That grief support, and logistically, what do we need to do just specifically with that loss? So just another way to add in, right? We don't, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. And when other people can help get us to the other side, feeling supported is huge.
And I think too, that sometimes I don't know why our society is why it is, but it
Mm,
is. But, they
mhm.
don't want to always talk about feelings and grief. And we all experience it at some point, because at
Yeah.
some point, someone we love or care about very much is going to
Mhm.
pass away.
Mhm.
And I think as a society in general, we need to do better at like honoring that,
Yeah, I agree.
and that it's okay to talk. And with our elderly parents, they were pretty stoic. You kept all that inside, inside, or you didn't
Mhm.
share it on social media, or you didn't talk about things. And that's part of the problem with our families is we don't talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think just taking time to honor how we feel about the grief of our loved one, but
Mhm.
encouraging our surviving parent that it's okay to talk. And sometimes, if you start asking, well, how are you feeling? I don't like that. I'm like, Dad, I was thinking about mom the other day. This is the memory that popped up in my head. How are you
Mm.
doing? But if
I
we
like
take the
that.
initiative to start
Yes.
that conversation, it makes it
Mhm.
okay and it makes it safe and more
Mhm.
comfortable. But if you just like, hey, it's been 6 months. How are you doing now that, mom's passed away? That's not the way to go around it.
Right. It's so open-ended, and I think
Um,
in the dance of conversation, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? It doesn't give us that pathway to actually really say how
Drill
we
down.
feel.
You need to
Yeah.
drill down and show your own
Mm,
vulnerability.
yeah. Thank you. I knew you were meant to be my guest on this podcast. Oh, thank
But
you.
I think
Yeah.
I would be remiss if we didn't talk about aging planning, because with that
Mm,
surviving spouse or that
yeah.
surviving parent,
Yeah.
what is the short term and long term solution?
Right.
That's why that aging plan is
Right.
important, because if you're like, well, dad was able to stay home because mom took care of him while
Mhm.
mom died, what
Mhm.
do we do with dad now?
Mhm.
That's always the question I get literally about 30 times a week with these new families that come
Yeah.
to us. They're like, well, now what do we do with dad? He can't stay at
Right.
home, or we can't just keep taking off work, or,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
husband is like, he's like, I'm done. You're done having to always be gone, And
Right.
so that aging plan is important, because if you want your parent to be safe,
Mhm.
happy, have the best
Mhm.
quality of life and the best quality of care possible, you have to have an aging plan, and know what resources are in the area until it makes sense to, let's start putting a plan in place. If dad lives in Tucson, Arizona, but the kids live in Ohio, maybe it makes more sense to bring dad to Ohio, and let's make sure that we have him in a care community that's going to be the right fit for him. And we teach families about how to do those tours. We actually find the care communities that are options
Mhm.
for them. And the other thing families need to know is that a lot of these good communities have waiting lists. So you can't stall. You can't keep putting this stuff off, because at some point your surviving parent is going to need care, and we need to get out of denial. We
Yeah.
need to face life as it is
Mhm.
and realize we need to have this stuff preferably all in
Mhm.
place proactively versus in crisis mode. Otherwise you get whatever care is available, and that might not be the right fit.
Yeah, and we're acting in high emotion, and we know decision making is never completely sound when we are in those heightened
Yeah.
states. Yeah, and you're right, they are tied together.
Mhm.
I have found that when that loss occurs, there's so much awareness that kids have because typically one spouse was right, not maybe I don't know if compensating is the right word. Maybe compensating
Yep.
is the right word for the
Yep.
other spouse or vice versa. And so there becomes this heightened awareness of the state of where we're at. And
Mhm.
we're obviously talking about situations where the other spouse is maybe in that caregiving role. But even in general, it's just the companionship. And when we're
Mhm.
in deep grief, we also need support then in other ways, the logistics, planning ahead. It might spur our thinking about maybe I do want to live in an environment where there's more socialization now that I'm alone. So it's thinking of all those things and having an aging plan in place is what is going to help us or starting that conversation to be able to
Mhm.
tackle some of those uh, components when they arise.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If we want our families to have the best possible outcomes, we have to plan for that. We can't be willy-nilly about the aging years and dementia and care, because the quality of care, especially since the pandemic, has plummeted. And so consumers / adult kids, you have to know the landscape of healthcare, and you have to know what you're getting into, or your loved one's getting into, and you have to know how to be a bold advocate, and you just have to know all of this information so that your family can have the best outcomes.
Yeah.
It's sad, especially coming from, my family, where we're just really close knit. It's sad that, you'd hope that the aging process brings families together and that they would work as a team, but that's just not always how that works.
Yeah.
And we haven't even talked, this is probably a whole nother podcast, but when it's a blended family and it's like, well, I don't want my dad getting sick taking care of your mom because, my dad isn't healthy, and now your mom has dementia and your mom's illness is going to take a toll on my dad, and then what does that all look like? And we work with those families. We work with those families, obviously, too. And, if you're in that, and if your listeners are in that boat, I can't stress enough how important it is to start having dialogue and relationships with your step siblings.
Yes.
Because a lot of times when I'm working with families, I'm like, so what relationship do you have with, your mom's kid, your mom's husband's kids? And they're like, well, we met once, and that was 20 years ago. Or maybe that's a newer marriage. You have to develop relationships with the other party, because you're going to have to work as a team.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really glad you brought that up. That is probably a whole nother podcast.
It is
Yes.
a whole nother
But it's
podcast.
so important.
That's like a whole other thing.
Yeah. And so common, most families that I interact with are blended in some way. It's the landscape of where we're at. Yeah.
Yep.
It is.
Yep. And so we just have to put, systems and solutions in place so that everybody is successful as they age. Because I say this every day, caregiving and aging can be a positive experience if you have an aging plan, if your family is communicating properly, if you have enough supports in place, if you have the grab and go binder where here's the accounts, here's the passwords, if dad needs care, here's a long-term care insurance policy, here's his military discharge records, so that you can start working with the VA and applying for VA benefits. I mean, the more that we can start normalizing these types of conversations instead of being so scared of them and intimidated. That's why people don't have them.
Right. Because I don't think
I have
they
a whole
know.
business. And that's what I do, is I facilitate your family meeting, because the other reality is you can't expect consumers or families to know what to do. They don't know what they don't know. They come to us so ill-informed and with a lot of assumptions. They assume Medicare is going to pay for everything. They use Medicare and Medicaid interchangeably as if it's the same program. They'll say assisted living and nursing home as if it's the same level of care. So you can't expect people who are naive and don't know what they don't know to facilitate their own family meetings and put a plan in place, because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
That'd be like me trying to fix a noise on my car. I'd ruin it. I'd screw it up. And that's what families do when they try all this navigating of it on their own. They make really, 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 really big avoidable mistakes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
completely. That's why we need experts that can be our guide.
That's what I do.
Yeah, that can be our guide. Do you have any grief resources that you like to tap into that you would recommend? Or is it really determined by location? I'm sure that's part of it, but
it is location, but part of it is family dynamics, because we have a relationship with our clients, right? So it's not transactional, because it's not a one size fits all. So, it just depends on a lot of what those family dynamics were. So like I have resources that I refer my clients to for specific grief work. If it was like a abusive relationship as a child, and now now that son or daughter is finding themselves as a caregiver, and now they have all that grief work that they have to do. So I have certain specialists that I refer them to based on what their unique needs are. But, I guess I kind of promoted some different support groups and Facebook groups, but you have to You have to be careful about what kind of group it is. So some of those caregiver groups, all it is a big complaint session. So it's like post after post after post of just complaints and how terrible it is, but there's no solution, right? So it's just like any other type of relationship you're trying to create. You need to make sure it's the right fit for you.
Yeah.
So like with our caregiver, our Care Right Family Caregiver Solutions Facebook group, that's why I put solutions after it.
I
Because
love
I'm like,
that word.
this
Because
isn't
it,
your,
yeah.
this isn't your online Facebook group where you're just going to complain about how overwhelmed you are. If you're overwhelmed, you need to work with us to put an aging plan in place, or you need to know how to tour care communities. So it's solutions based, because otherwise, if it's just energy draining, that's not productive use of your time and your energy, right? Because it's not a solution, it's just more of the same of complaints. So make sure that, you know, if you're the adult kid listening to this, that maybe you help kind of weed out some of those support groups that are online or even in person where it's just a big complaint session, because that's not going to be helpful. That's not therapeutic.
Just drag us down. Yeah. It's like, it's that whole idea of we are like the people we spend most time with, right? So if everyone we're surrounding ourselves with is negative and complaining, that'll be our lens. But if we're, and I get there's space for saying how we feel and then what our solutions and how we can move forward or be encouraged to move forward. Yeah.
That's right. You know, because you don't want to get stuck. Yeah. And if you're in those types of Facebook groups or support groups where that seems the theme, now you gotta give it a chance, right? So don't just go to one support group or one, don't be like, oh, they complain the whole time. Well, maybe that was, you know, so check it out 2 or 3 times, give it a little bit of a chance and see if, okay, is this just how they roll? Like, is this what they do? Or was this like an off meeting, you know, kind of thing that they had? So, you know, just like with anything, give it a whirl. And if it doesn't feel right after, you know, 2, 3, 4 times, then move on, try something different. But grief it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's trial and error, and this worked and this comforted him today, but that might not work tomorrow. So the more that we can get educated on grief and that type of loss and let ourselves go through that roller coaster of emotions, the more that we're going to be able to help support our surviving parent.
Yeah, completely. And it like you said, it's difficult for everyone involved and we're assuming that relationship was close and tight knit because we know there's complexity in relationship, and it can be challenging not only for our parent but for us. How do you encourage everyone involved? You know, where do we, let's say we experience that loss, what do you do first? And tell us more about where we can connect with you as well.
Sure. I do want to just say one thing super quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is because sometimes your loved one dies unexpectedly and you didn't get to say things that you wanted to say because you always think you have more time, and we don't have more time. Like, you can't assume you have more time. So proactively get things off your chest that you need to, or say, you know, I love how you raised us, or you did this and that's how it affected me, you know. And so sometimes, you know, you miss that opportunity with one of your parents. So don't miss that don't make the same mistake with your surviving parent. So if you want to, because once they're gone, death is final. Death is final, right? So no more getting to share, no more getting to clear the air, no more any of that. So don't wait, because we don't have the time we think. So if you want to learn more about Care Right and aging planning and family meetings and how to develop an aging plan, you can contact me. My name is Annalee Kruger. I'm the owner of Care Right Incorporated. We have the free Facebook group. You can look it up on Facebook. It's Care Right Family Caregiver Solutions Facebook group. We'll let you in the group, and but if you're a family member out there, or you're starting to see the red flags that things aren't going great with your parents, or you're already in crisis mode where you're overwhelmed, or you did have a death and you need to figure out what to do with your surviving parent. That's all of our areas of expertise, all things aging, caregiving, and dementia progression. That's where we stay.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so valuable and so helpful. And I hope people go visit your website. We'll put all of that information in the show notes so they can click on the link and be directed right to where you are. And you were the person to do this with me. Thank you.
Well, and I just want to, I know this is like, because I know people are coming often in crisis. Yeah. So I wrote a book called The Invisible Patient, The Emotional, Financial, and Physical Toll on Family Caregivers. You can get it either on Amazon, but if you get it on Amazon, they don't let us know who bought the book.
Yes.
Or if you want to just get it directly from me, you can reach out to me on the website too and say, hey, I heard this podcast with Nicole. If you want to schedule a complimentary consult, we offer a 30-minute free to them consult. Just to see what your situation is and what solutions we have that can help you. So just mention that you heard us on Nicole's podcast, and we're always happy to help and wherever you live and wherever you are in your caregiving and family journey.
That would be great. Thank you. And you also have a podcast, Solutions for the Caregiver Crisis. People can go and find that, right? Apple, Spotify, I'm assuming all the platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we do similar to what you do. We get some really, really amazing people doing amazing things. Yeah. And so there's that as a resource as well. But I always like to get to know people and just that way. So exactly. Just don't be afraid to reach out and schedule a consult and just let's see how we can help each other.
That sounds wonderful. Yes. Thank you. This was so helpful, and I could hear you talk all day. I'm sure, and your lens on the world, and I've appreciated your perspective. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everybody for listening to Nicole's important podcast and listen to all of her episodes, because you find the real gems in the world. So and thank you, Chris, if you are listening. Thank you for connecting us.
Thank you for tuning in to the Care Right podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, Care Right is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.